Welcome to Rojo Rest Hour, your ultimate destination for rest, peace, and power. I'm your host, Dr. Michelle Majors, and every episode is dedicated to one thing: helping women slow down, let go of the hustle, and embrace the flow. It's time to rest. Welcome to Rojo Rest Hour. I'm your host, Dr. Michelle Majors, and this is the final episode of our 3-part series with grief coach Michelle Haughton. And listen, we've talked about the weight of grief. We've talked about the armor and trauma that grief builds up in us. But this time, we're going to do a little something different. We are going to talk about love. How grief and the aftermath of relationships, how it impacts us, how it really, really manifests in how we think moving forward, what we hope for, what we think is possible in the world of love for us. But what we know is, and what Michelle's going to talk to us about today, is that, look, we don't have to rush out of that grief. Let's actually use that grief to be able to grow and create something newly in our future. And sometimes you got to rest and be still and let your soul catch up. So we're going to take a deep breath. We're going to have this conversation about moving forward after heartbreak, after any kind of separation. And we're going to move right through the ache and create new possibilities. So that said, Michelle Haughton, welcome back.
Hello, thank you. This is our last one. It's so amazing to hear. This has been a great opportunity. And I want to say, first off, thank you so much for including me in this vision of yours. And I'm so excited that we are spotlighting this. I'm excited about this last chapter, relationships, and really connecting to our life after we experienced a relationship that was not what we envisioned. So let's do this.
All right. First question. What do you believe is or are some of the biggest mistakes that we make after a relationship is ended? And let's say, and I know it's different whether you're the breaker or the breakee, what the circumstances surrounding it. But so let's just use for the sake of this conversation, let's talk about the person whose relationship ended unexpectedly, traumatically. There was some deceit, some deception, some desertion. What are some of the biggest mistakes we make in order to be able to move forward into the next relationship, or just move forward in life?
Realizing we're human, realizing that life is to be lived. And you said two things, and I wanted, when you said it immediately, I was like, oh, being in relationships or things end when maybe there was some deceit or deception, right? When we go through relationships where it ends where it didn't end the way that we wanted to. We thought we were going to be with our forever person. We thought we were going to have children with this person. And now we're in this position where this is not my reality. And so we put some of that blame on ourselves. I think as women, we do that often. Like, oh, what could I have done better? Or what did I do wrong? Instead of having a moment to kind of reflect on the relationship. I kind of talked about this yesterday, the hard, the harder, and the hardest. When we leave something, especially in a relationship, looking at it and just allowing ourselves the time to enjoy the moments that were good. We often kind of reflect on the things that were bad and we hold on to those experiences, but we don't think about the things that were good and take those experiences that were good and the things that were not so good. Take what we can take as lessons from those experiences and apply what do we want next time and look at it from that perspective. We have to free ourselves from carrying the burdens of past relationships. Once we do that, I think we are allowing ourselves to then show up in our next relationship, however that may be, in whatever capacity, a healthier person, right? A person that's able to say, this is what I want. This is not what I want. This is what I've learned. and this is what I've gained.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. In my past life, I was a breakup recovery coach.
Mm.
And one of the things that I think is a huge trap is one word. Why? Why?
Mm.
I need to know why. And we become obsessed with understanding why. And I'm always like, I don't think knowing that answer is really going to make you feel is give you the relief that you think you want.
Right.
What are your thoughts about asking why? Does it matter? Should we be asking that question, or is it a trap to get in that loop of why?
I think the question itself of why is a trap. However, what I utilize is it's kind of funny. I love food and I love documentaries. So I was watching a food documentary and it was talking about Swiss cheese and different cheese and how things were made. And in my mind, I don't know why I thought Swiss cheese was just that's how it looked. It was formed wholly, and that's the way you cut it is how it was formed. But that's not true. It's actually a solid mass. And through the aging process, that's how the holes are in the cheese. And as I was watching that, I was like, that's kind of the same example as our life. We start off kind of whole, and through life experiences and trauma and things that we go through, a part of us starts to be taken.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of asking ourselves why, and I was sitting there, I was like, I need to ask myself, what did I lose in
Mm-hmm.
this situation? Because it's what we've lost. That's what we're looking for. That's what we're trying to fill that void with. But once we get clear with what we lost, whether if you were in a relationship and there was deception, what did you lose out of that deception? I lost my security. Maybe you thought that it wasn't, I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't that beautiful woman. So now I'm feeling insecure and I look back at myself. Maybe if I was 10 pounds lighter, this wouldn't have happened. So now we can start somewhere. We
Mm-hmm.
have a direction. So the why is good, but now let's get a little bit more specific. Let it be a compass. And that is something that I use not only in relationships, but in every aspect, life after loss. Something has happened, you have lost something. What is that something? And let's
Mm-hmm.
fill that cup.
Mm-hmm. I think there another part of it. So I went through a pretty, in my life was the break. You know how you have that one breakup that makes you reevaluate and like, who was I? And it takes spins you out and all that, right? So I went through that, and it's so interesting. I had my good friend Talina, if you're listening. At the same time, she was going through a divorce. Now, me and the person I was breaking up, we didn't have assets together. We didn't have kids together. We had
Mhm.
nothing. It was just this thing that I had made this relationship out to be. In retrospect, now I'm looking like, I ran into him, a couple months ago, and I was like, what? Like, what were you thinking? Right? Just outrageous, right? So, what she said to me was, Michelle, do you know at some point you're going to be okay? And I'm like, yeah, I'll be okay. Then she says, why don't you just cut out all this middle part and get to the okay part? You can choose not to suffer. And so she's going through this divorce with kids and figuring it all out. And I mean, I'm sure she had moments. She talked about it, but they were nowhere near this. Oh, how can I continue? How many indignities must I be made to suffer, Lord? Like all the drama and the hype that I put into nothing. So I think part of it is the ego that
Mhm.
so that's one thing. And another thing is this sunk cost kind of thing. Like I've put so much into this. I'm getting my money back. I'm getting my effort out of this somehow. And so that's all part of how I see happening when people are leaving relationships that they've been in a long time. What are your thoughts about um this ego, how ego gets in the way of our ability to see the truth and see the beauty of the end of something that was bringing you pain, but you're still focusing on all the rose parts and not the thorns that were there.
I love how you said you had to go through a dramatic moment and then the ego. Um, sometimes, and we were talking about the judgment yesterday, sometimes we have to allow ourselves to feel those moments of, let me validate who I was in this relationship. Let me validate how I showed up in this relationship. I don't think that's more of ego. I think it's more or less sometimes we have to hear it, especially if we are leaving a situation where now we weren't treated that well. So we have to be reminded of our efforts so we can hold on to those, so we can take those efforts into our next relationship. Um, I've had situations myself where I had to like sit there and hold on to some ego because my ego was the thing that was going to keep me from not falling apart.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thankful for that because I needed that strength because the little Michelle in me would have just crumbled. My experience is my very first wife. I grew up in a all pretty much white community. My first boyfriend was white. We dated off and on for 10 years. And I did not find out till recently, 4 years ago, that he never claimed me. And he went around town like, oh, I would never date her. She's Black.
Wow.
And not only did other people know that, my best friend knew that as well and never told me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I could have been like, wow, I've struggled with this identity growing up in white communities, trying to really connect to my melanin, trying to connect to this beautiful woman that I am as a Black woman. My first love didn't appreciate the fact that I was Black. And then sometimes in my own marriage, that showed up where my husband didn't want to take me around coworkers because, like, oh, I have a Black wife. Maybe it's not going to be appreciated. So I had to hold on to some of that ego that I developed over time. Like, okay, I am this beautiful Black. It's not my fault that you're insecure and you're not able to say I'm married or I'm dating a Black person. Um, but I had to lean onto that ego because for so many years, I was so insecure about the same things that they were saying was the reason why they didn't want to be with me or denied me in front of people. So, um, relationships and the ego and what we have to hold on to when we are exiting, I always encourage hold on to the things that's going to help you get from, like your friend told you, you don't have to, let's jump through the suffering. What can we get to this part, and let's get to the good part.
Yeah. And I also want to be responsible for that because I've said my teachings that I've in my personal development sphere and all the ways that I think and tells me that in so many ways, suffering, we talked about yesterday, is part of a story that we keep putting in. Suffering comes from the story that I made up about you can just dump me and move on and have this amazing life. I don't know if his life was amazing, right? And so then, oh, he gets remarried and he just gets to forget about like all that was all the suffering. And I recently went through my journal and I was looking at all the stuff I read and I'm like, wow, you had that story. Because now my story is good luck with you, girl. Good luck. Because the thing is that when people do things and just move on, more times than not, they're taking all those ways of being with them and they're putting it on the next person that just feels more free because they don't have the baggage, right? And so I just wanted to appeal to a lot of, to women listening who've gone through a breakup and they're creating the stories of, wow, and the social media. Oh, I was all in the social media and that just validated all the yucky that I was feeling and I'm not enough and she's better and why don't you want me and all of that.
Absolutely.
So,
and we do that. And I think as women, because we compare ourselves, and then especially when we're in a place of heartache and brokenness, we're going to continuously tell ourselves what we are not, especially if we have someone's actions validating those insecurities in ourselves, then we show up in that way. And I think that's where we have to really dig a little bit deeper. And when we do have those moments and we do have those judgmental thoughts, to quickly reframe them and tell ourselves and remind ourselves how beautiful we are and remind ourselves. And that's exactly in those moments where you're like, I was this type of woman. Like, you can't tell me how terrible I was. I can pinpoint, and say this and that. And sometimes we have to hold on to that because if we don't, then the next person that we are with is going to pay for those wounds of the person that we were with prior to. And we don't want to bring that into our new relationship. And for those who have been in situations like that, I've been personally in situations like that. And it wasn't for me, the recipient, because I'm paying for so and so. And I'm a whole new person, love me for me, not love me plus all your baggage that comes. And I'm still trying to help you figure it out too.
Mm-hmm. I am very, very, oh shoot, I lost my thought. But I'm very clear that man's rejection is God's protection. I am so clear about that. I am so clear about that. And I remember a woman that I went to go see because I could not process what I was feeling in a way that was healthy. And so I went to see this therapist, and she was like, believe it or not, one day you're going to look up and you're going to go, thank God.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, can it come tomorrow? Can it come? Right. And so it's hard for people to see in the midst of it when all things look like you've been abandoned or deserted or betrayed or any of that. And you're just taking in all of the pain. You're taking in all of the stuff. But when you're taking it all in, you're also taking in the things that were not yours to take.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't listen. In that relationship, I didn't do anything wrong. But that took me a minute to get to where I was like, wait a minute. I am hurting because of your baggage?
Right.
That makes no sense. Right. And so I think what you were saying about the power of ego, what came to me was like the power of pride. Sometimes you have to tell yourself, even if you have to say, look, I know I'm better than you. And so I would leave too if I were you, because hello, you're not even whatever story, it's all a story. You might as well find the story that empowers you. Right. So even if you have to tell yourself, yeah, I would have left too if I had so little to bring, and you had to look someone like me in the face every day and reflect back all the things that you're not. So you're going to try to make me think that I'm the one that's not. I'm not playing that game with you. Choose the story that empowers you. Now, I know I've been accused. My sister's says this all the time. You always move into premature Buddhahood, meaning I'm just trying to get to a place where I don't hurt. I'm, whatever I have to do to say, oh, it's God's will, or it's better, or he's hurting, so I can have compassion for him because I know I need to get past this feeling of like, I can't fix it. I can't do anything about it. I might as well find some higher ground to make myself believe that this was all the best thing, even though sometimes I don't feel it. So what's your thought about people moving into this place, as my sister said, prematurely before you've actually done the work? Is there power in that? Or do you say, no, slow down, don't go there yet, because we need to feel something here? Or do you say, if that gives you some ease in this moment so we can think freely, do it?
I think the universe doesn't make any mistakes. Where you are in that moment is exactly where you are in that moment. And if you need to protect yourself in that moment and not go there emotionally, not connect to it, and in order for you to get to a place that's safe, then I encourage that. If you are ready to go and develop and do the work, then I also encourage that. One of the things that I am mindful of, and I don't think we really touched on, and we were describing, and you were speaking, I thought about the walls that we create. When I speak with people, that's what I look out for the most. What walls is this creating for this person in their life that is keeping them right in that spindle of where that roadblock that they're trying to move from? What wall has this experience created for you? Because we do that. Instead of releasing things, we let it build a wall. And I thought about it when you were saying they're out living their life, and here I am sitting here, you're building up all of these walls, right? And then next we're just sitting solo in the wall that we created while the world still exists. So it's, for me, it's really, what do you need in this moment to move you forward? What do you need in your healing? I'll meet you there.
Mm-hmm.
Because looking back and reflecting on all of my relationships, I have been that person different in all of them at different times.
Mm-hmm.
But was that exactly what I needed in that moment? Absolutely. Because
Mm-hmm.
I needed that time to reflect in that space, or I needed to feel it in that moment so I can connect to it. I needed to be the person to allow the situation to continue to happen. Why? Because I probably wasn't ready to make a change yet. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we're not.
Mm-hmm.
But each one is valid in the space in which you're in.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So grief coach Michelle.
Mhm.
Dear grief coach Michelle, I am grieving because I did not get the ending that I feel honored, not only what I put into it, but what we shared. I can't move on without that piece of at least saying, I saw what you did, or I valued what you brought. There's that need for some kind of acknowledgement, and I can't move on with that out that piece. How do I do that?
My first question for you would be, who are you seeking that acknowledgement from?
Oof. Wow. Yeah, the person who hurt me. That's what, yes. And I'm very clear. I'm seeking this acknowledgement from somebody who likely I know will never give it to me, which makes me more angry. And for whatever reason that they made the choice they made, that had nothing to do with me. That was their own wounds and trauma. I get it. But I just feel so just dogged.
Yeah. Now, now that you said that, and you already said that you probably will not receive that from this person,
Mhm.
does that change the way that you see yourself and how you just validated the efforts that you put into that relationship?
No, you can't take away. I know the effort I put in. I'm very clear. I know how I showed up in that relationship and what I gave and committed to this process, to this relationship. Does it change? So I want, this is a clarifying question. Does it change how I feel about myself, or does it change how I think about the breakup? Which question are you?
What do you feel more connected to for yourself? How does it show up for you?
Um, I find my most power. I mean, I find my power right now at this phase of the situation in validating what I put into it. Because right now, all I feel is that something was taken away, or I didn't do enough, or that, right? But I do feel some peace and some power knowing, wait a minute now. What I do know is that I held up my end of the bargain. That's all I have that gives me some relief in this moment.
And with knowing that, if he ever does come to you, is that going to change what you know?
No, it is not going
Now,
to change what I know.
it's not going to change what you know. And I think it's when we expect and we want to hear that apology and that forgiveness from someone, or just that recognition, I need you to see what I have done. I need to hear it out your mouth. You also said that even if he does say that, then I'm going to be questioning that intent, questioning if he meant it, questioning if he was telling me the truth, questioning and all this other stuff, even though he just said exactly what I wanted him to say. You just said, I want him to validate me. So in reality, that does, whether he does or not, you're still going to question it. Impact over intent.
Mm-hmm.
But you have already validated your efforts. We hold on so much to the thing, like you just said, I'm waiting for this. You already know that's the trash. That's recycling. We already put that on the corner. We're done with that.
Yeah.
We're going to take what we just realized. I was very valuable in this relationship. We're going to take that with us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We need to free ourselves of the bondage of ever expecting someone to come up to us and actually say and value us.
Mm-hmm.
We can't expect us out of people.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you expect because I'm pretty sure that's how you would treat someone in your shoes. You would tell them you are valuable. I see you.
Mm-hmm.
They might not be there yet, and that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
But we're not going to let that stop me from being who I am. And you already said who you are, and you already said what you've learned from it. And that's what I would encourage, because you already know. Sometimes you just need to talk about it, say it out loud.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But the question for you is, how are you going to move forward now that you've said that? Now that you've heard yourself and you realize that you don't really need his forgiveness, is that something that you would be able, or actually need to hear him validate you? Could you
Mm.
move forward without hearing him ever say that? Is that going to stop you?
Not going to stop me one bit. I have to move forward. So there's that pride piece in me too, right? Like, no, I got to move forward. It's not like I can choose just to like sit here in this stew. This is too painful, right? I have to move forward. And there's that pride piece, but there's also the, I get to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
I get to move forward with my life, right? And that is so important. You know, I've been every woman at every stage of the disorientation, like what just happened, all the way through to, okay, I think I'm having some ease and some peace about what happened. And I can hold a space of grace for it because I know nothing happens to me, it happens for me.
Absolutely.
Right? And so throughout that whole process, I think it kind of goes, I'm just thinking, embrace the thing you said earlier. Like, if that's what you need right now to be prideful, if you need right now, if it feels better to have grace where you can take a higher ground and look and have that perspective instead of this limited perception of what is all happening. I think there's peace in being free. And you've said this word so many times. We need to be free to be where we are in the moment and honor it and not beat ourselves up for being angry and not beat ourselves up for being embarrassed and ashamed and all of those things that we bring to it. So that's kind of what's resonated for me, is that freedom to be where you're at with no judgment, knowing you're on your way somewhere. You got, you know, this is just one of many phases you'll go through to take flight.
I agree. And we have to, and I tell myself this as well. We have to stop looking outwardly for the grace that we need to give inwardly.
Mm-hmm.
And that example that you gave is a beautiful example of, I need to connect to that feeling when I just said, I gave this effort. I know how I showed up. I loved very hard. And when you start feeling it in your body,
Mm-hmm.
connecting to that emotion,
Mm-hmm.
because then when someone else comes to you and say, well, you didn't show up this way, you have something to anchor onto. You have that memory, that emotional connection. Like, I know the person that I am. I know how I show up. Because the reality is, you might meet someone that has the same characteristics as the person that you were dating that was toxic in the workplace as your supervisor, telling you how terrible you are. And
Mm-hmm.
you can be like, how do this person reminds me of my ex-husband. Thank you. Right. But you're prepared to show up in a different way because now you're like, you know what? I know who I am. And then you can anchor into that emotional connection. And then that will allow you. And we have to do that, going inward. And that's what I do, because it's tough. It is so tough,
Mm-hmm.
especially as Black women, especially when we are constantly reminded of the negative things, and not oftentimes are we reminded of how beautiful we are. So thank you for sharing that, because I love that example.
Yeah, yeah. I want to bring this back. Well, first, I want to talk about forgiveness. Um, I had written this book called From Breakup to Wake Up. And one of the things that what I learned about is like there's four kinds of forgiveness. Well, they talk about, I'm sure there's probably many, I don't know. But there is unconditional forgiveness where you're like, that's usually more of a parent child, you know, one of those
Mm-hmm.
kind of deeper, but maybe it goes beyond that. And then there is conditional forgiveness where, look, this has to happen for me to release it and forgive and really move into this. There's another kind of forgiveness. I forgot the name of it, but it's more about, I forgive you, but I don't want to fool with you no more. Right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm okay. I'm complete. I forgive you. You're wounded. I get it. But no, we're done. You know, I don't want to move any further. But the final one, which is my favorite and where I go to, is this intellectual forgiveness, where I know there's a deeper reason, or I
Mm,
know that um, I am actively choosing to forgive you, but I'm still feeling some stuff. I'm still angry, or I'm still sad. I'm feeling it, but I'm actively choosing to forgive you so that I can start my process of recovery and move forward. I had a friend challenge that and say, that's not forgiveness. That's like pretending. That's pretending, right? If you still feel the anger and all that other stuff, then this idea of intellectual forgiveness is not a real thing, because you can't mentally forgive somebody but still spiritually or emotionally ache from what they did. What are your thoughts
mm.
about those, about in particular that intellectual forgiveness?
Oh, wow. No, I was thinking about when you said that your friend said that that isn't possible. And it's like, wow, I'm thinking about my relationship with my mother. Um, and if that wasn't possible, then I wouldn't be able to be in this relationship that I have with my mother now, because I had to go through so many different levels of forgiveness. And even in marriage, you have different levels of forgiveness, or in relationships that fail. So I think when we have our healing journey, we have to remember we are like onions. There's so many different layers of us. And as we learn and we develop understanding, our experiences, we talked a little bit about this, in our beliefs. Um, our ideas of what relationships are based off of our experience. And especially if we didn't have solid tools,
Mhm.
we probably didn't know certain things. So I am like you. I'm a big conditional type of forgive. It's not, I have to understand why.
Mm,
I'm a why person.
okay.
I have to understand. I was the one that took apart VCRs and put them back together because I needed to understand why it worked.
Mhm.
And by understanding why will allow me to see how I work. And if that means that I can forgive you in this moment in time, but I'm not able to forgive these other situations that has happened, that's okay, because I'm still moving forward. If
Mhm.
I'm creating a situation where I forgive you, but I don't want to F with you, that's because I'm creating my boundary and my safe space. Um, and I have different levels and different situations with a lot of people that I can see relationships with visually as we're talking about this. And I believe that all of them have its proper place.
Mhm.
I believe that in order for you to have full healing, that conditional healing is something that's so important, because you have to protect. And not only that, you discover so much about yourself.
Mm.
You discover so much about a situation. We spoke the other day about our learning more about your partner or your person's experience later on. Like, I'm going to use myself again for an example. My husband and I, we got married really quick. We met each other on the chat line. We found out we were pregnant a month later. We got married literally, uh, to be completely honest, this is so crazy. We met in July. It was VBS. The first day of my son's first day of school, September, and we got married in October. So July, September, and October. So it was really, really quick. I didn't know this man from a can of paint. I said I do before I met him. So as you can imagine, our first year of marriage was really, really hard, because I'm learning this person I said I do to, but I had to have that conditional forgiveness, because as I'm learning him, I'm like, what? And this is how you're treating me, and I'm angry about this, but now we're learning each other. So
Mhm.
if I didn't have that level of or conditional forgiveness, I would have had I'm done. Here's my boundary. I'm out the door.
Mm.
So each has a purpose, and it
Mhm.
allows us to discover and really get that level of healing and that clarity. I'm all about clarity.
Yeah. Oh, I am so about clarity. For someone who has my background and the moving all the time and homeless, just all of the things that you would think that I'm very good in gray areas, and I can work in gray areas. But when there's clarity, I can say this: I'm unstoppable. When I'm
Mhm.
clear, you can't stop me. But when I'm trying to figure out where's it, are you telling the truth? I thought we had that conversation. When I'm doing all that, I don't. I don't feel grounded. I don't feel grounded in my body. I don't feel grounded in the relationship. So clarity is absolutely critical for me. But I think though that being clarity gives us freedom because we know
Mhm.
what it is and we can choose it. But when you're not clear, you can't even really choose who I'm with, or can we work through this, because it's just not clear. But I want to go back to something you said, and it was about with your mother.
Mhm.
Some of the most devastating heartbreaks comes from our parents, right? And then we carry that into love relationships, and it manifests itself in all these ways. And I came from a school of thought that, and this is deep, if you that is your primary relationship. If you cannot have peace with that relationship, you can't be successful in other relationships, right?
Mhm.
And that's a really tough pill to swallow for people who've really been mistreated by parents, right? But part of it is making peace with it means unconditional. I mean, make. I don't want to fool with you. I don't want to f with you, but I forgive you and I release you, and I release all the pain that you brought towards me that wasn't my pain to take, right? So I wanted to make that distinction, and how the importance of that. How do you see that particular relationship and the grief that comes from that as central to how we
Mm.
frame all relationships?
Very key. I remember watching a TED Talk, and I can't remember who was speaking on it, but she said if you want to see how a dysfunctional child, where they get it from, you need to look at the health of their mother, the
Mm,
health and wellness of their mother. And it's so true. However, that we spoke about the empathy, understanding that we only live this life once. And sometimes our parents, they they do the best that they can with the tools that they are given. And especially as Black women, there's a different reality. I look at my mom, and she grew up during segregation.
mm,
She went to an all white school. She had snakes thrown on her in school. She
mm,
had a lot of harsh upbringings. And I think we need to normalize speaking about our experiences,
mhm.
because
Mm,
we hold on to the judgment and shame of going through some shit.
mhm,
We feel like, oh, if I express this or if I talk about it, then that's going to reflect on me as a person.
mhm,
Instead of showing, like you said, this is what I have gone through, this is what I have done, this is how I got through it, and
mm,
using these lessons. And I remember one time I had a conversation with my mom, and I was expressing with her the things that hurt me growing up as a child. And I was like, was there anything that you would have done differently? And her answer was, I wish I would have taken the time to get to know you as a person.
mm,
Because my mom's looking, and she's like, I get to see this adult, and I see how wonderful you are. She's like, I don't think I ever gotten a chance to know you.
mm,
There, our parents exist, and sometimes they just continue to thrive and exist to provide.
mhm,
The relationships and forgiveness, I've coached on both things. I've coached clients who's had toxic relationships with their parents, and they cut them off. They have to remove themselves in order for them to get that level of healing. And
mhm,
that was the right course of action for them
mhm,
because of that level of toxicity. Um, it I really encourage whatever works for the person to that be the method.
mhm,
I know
mhm.
mine, it took me a while to get there,
Yeah.
but I
Yeah.
had to honor each stage of my healing process,
Mhm,
you
mhm,
know.
mhm. Um, I have 8 things in my head. Let me see which one, given almost 40 minutes here. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, when I went through what I went through, I started my sister was like, acupuncture, it's gonna help you. It's gonna help you ground, so I wasn't familiar with acupuncture, so I'm like, sure.
Mhm.
I went to acupuncture and I would have my music, and I would sit in the chair. And what I realized is that I was starting to feel better. And I'm sure there is absolute, I believe in acupuncture. I still do acupuncture. And I have found great benefit from it. But at that time, what I didn't realize, and I made this connection to, oh, it's not just the needles, it is sitting still in silence.
Mm.
That was a huge part. For 45 minutes, you got needles in you, but you're not thinking, you're not fixing anything, nothing's wrong. You're able to just, right? And so when I think about Rojo, spirit rest,
Mhm.
part of this grief process comes because we don't slow down to even think, feel. We just want to move. That's how we're conditioned. Just move, 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 do something, fix it, fix it, fix it, move.
Yeah.
And until we can just be and sit in one place and actually get connected, just like your mom was like, I didn't know you. I guarantee there are women who will say, I don't even know myself,
Mhm.
right? I know the bad things about me. I know my tendencies. I know my wounds, but I don't know my softness. I don't know my deepest humanity and my divinity and my beauty and all of those things that really allow us the freedom to not be impacted and tethered to anybody, but also allow us the grace to just let the stuff go.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about rest, slowing down, and how it is central to our ability to heal?
It's key. It is everything. We cannot heal our body, period, scientifically saying, unless we are in the rest and digest state of mind and state of being in our body. And that's why we often see ourselves on the other end of a lot of the negative sides of the health. Um, Blood pressure, diabetes, overweight, because we're not allowing ourselves to get to that place of rest. So how do we do that? What are some ways that we can do that? Because we're actively moving in this stress response, thinking I have, let's be realistic. We have a lot of our beautiful queens holding 2 or 3 jobs. We have our children. We have the societal stresses. So I don't have time to even think about how I can rest and relax and get, can I get 5 minutes of quiet to myself? Yes, you can. Journaling, allowing yourself that space to even get your thoughts out. Because when we're holding everything in, that's the worst place for it to be.
Mhm.
We're trapping it within ourselves. So even if you have a very busy day, you can grab a book, grab a journal, write it out, give it some space, honor it. You're quiet within yourself. Yoga, breath work,
Mhm.
breathing. It's so important for our healing process because without it, we're not going to get ourselves out of that trauma response.
Mhm.
And then not only that, when we are able to take ourselves from a place of active mindset and we're in a place where we can control the way that we think, the way that we feel about ourselves, then we're more able to really identify the thoughts that we have in our mind that are not true
Mhm. Mhm.
because we're not in that response way of
That's
thinking,
that's right.
right? Um, And that is important. Reframing the way that we think and allowing ourselves the space to be able to do that. So have fun
Mm.
figuring that out. I think we really want this idea of the healing journey to be so, it's like weight loss. Ugh, I don't want to go to the gym, but I want to
Mm.
have a nice summer body. We hear the word workout and we're like, ugh. So allow ourselves to be free to explore,
Mhm.
try out different modalities. You said you did acupuncture. We can do some Reiki. There is some
Mhm.
here. I live in Olympia. We have Oli Float where you get to go in one of those heavy salt baths.
All over
So
Austin.
there's so many things, going out in nature, grounding, sitting in some water. There's so many amazing, beautiful things. Have you ever sat near the water, put your feet in it, and just cried? Just
Mm.
gave it all to the water and just let the water just take it away and
Mhm.
saying thank you.
Mhm.
That's free, right? But
Mhm.
it's also very freeing. So
Yes.
these are ways that we can just connect back to ourselves as mind, body, and soul.
Mhm.
And that allows us to get ourselves from that response that trauma response and get ourselves to that rest. And by doing that, homeostasis, I always say that, but that's how we create that balance so we can actually start healing in
You've
more
said,
ways than one.
you've said several times over the last 3 episodes about be curious, right?
Mm-hmm.
Never take ourselves out of ourselves long enough to go, oh, I want to add a stroke there. Oh, I love this color. I'm going to add that to myself. I'm going to reinvent myself. But you have to step away out of yourself to be able to see this version of yourself that you want to bring to life. And you can really design that person and get to know that person and create that person newly. Look, I don't care what you've been through. You can
Mm-hmm.
be a new person today. If
Absolutely.
you choose to say, look, I don't want to be a victim to somebody anymore. I don't want my main narrative to be, oh, I got the gout. I got, every time, people who always reporting about their sickness or their illness or their fatigue. What would it be like to just reinvent yourself newly without all of the old baggage, right? That is a curiosity and an exploration of who you can possibly be. Um, what was the last? I wanted to ask you. So yesterday we kind of ended on this whole thing of, and if you want good sex, have good sex. That's where we kind of ended. And I was like, we're going to
Absolutely.
talk about that more on our next episode. And I want to, because sexual health and sexual release is so important, right? It
Mm-hmm.
is so important to have that. And look, there was somebody that I knew that was a sexual coach. And one of the things that they were saying was, especially if you haven't had kids, you haven't had that ultimate release. Like having children is
Mm-hmm.
this whoosh of bringing something to life in a way that just no one else could ever understand what that is, present company included here. So if you haven't had that experience, sexual release and is a huge part of health. Can you talk about how sex plays a role, or does it, in overcoming grief and moving forward in reinventing yourself?
One thing I know that sex interacts with grief is oftentimes when you are going through a grieving process, you might find yourself more sexually active because again, it's that looking for something that we have lost, and that is a emotional response. If you think about it, when you are intimate with someone, you're not just physically, you're emotionally connected. You are releasing hormones, and that is something in itself that people do experience. However, it has been not normalized. It's like, oh, well, you're more, well, why are you wanting to have a sexual partner when you're going through this grieving process? Well, because it's natural. That's what the body wants, and that's what the body is yearning for. I think with trauma and with relationships, oftentimes women find the opposite. They find it's hard to
Mhm.
connect to their sexual
Mhm.
being after experiencing something traumatic.
Mhm.
So it's that reconnecting back to that femininity, that beautiful softness that we have a very hard time reconnecting to.
Mhm.
So I encourage women to, especially if you've been sexually assaulted in relationships. I had a guest on my podcast. It was Sexy After SA, and she does dancing and connecting to the body and just that human touch again and knowing what you want. That all needs to be normalized in grief. Just whatever direction that you are going in this, how you view sex, to allow yourself to be curious,
Mhm.
because that curiosity gives you choice,
That's
that
right.
allows you to make your choice. Like, okay, well, maybe I like this, maybe I like that. And then it opens up the door for you to authentically be yourself in that realm and not judgmental,
Mhm.
because sex, intimacy is a place where there's a lot of judgment.
Mhm. Mhm. What I hear you saying in that is what you've been saying. You just said the word choice, and you've been saying it over the last 3 episodes. Whatever you're gonna do, make sure you're choosing it. That
Mhm.
it's not a default reaction. There's power in saying, the best way to get over this person is to get underneath another person. That's what I'm gonna do. You know what I'm saying? Like if you are actively and clearly and squarely choosing that,
Mhm.
it's so it's so different of an experience when you don't feel shame, because you're going to do it anyway. Choose the story that empowers you. You're doing it because, look, I am clear. I need this release. And you don't have judgment about it. It's a whole different experience than trying to, oh, I feel so bad. Now you're adding that shame on to the grief and all the other things. So I think part of what you're saying, that sex and that judgment, it's there. And we are very susceptible to it, especially as Black women. Somebody once said that Black women don't date to something about, we date to mate. We don't date to explore. So then we were dating somebody, and then there's not this freedom of like, let me check out who you are. Let me check out what your deal is. Let me check, let me get to know you. It's this, everything is about what the future, and what we just need to have some freedom around dating, freedom around our bodies, and being able to explore and express ourselves in different ways, in ways on our terms that we're trying to, because that's taking back your power in that way. And, we have religious things that say, hey, don't do that.
I was thinking that same thing.
We have cultural things that are like, don't be all these things. And so I just wanted to center that, or bring that to this conversation, because someone might be going through a breakup and they got their eye on somebody and they're like, oh, I can't do.
Or vice versa. They might be going through a breakup and then decided, you know what? I want to be by myself, or celibacy. That is something that is also looked down upon. But it goes back to what you were saying. It all allows you to become reflective and take this moment of rest and peace to figure out what exactly you want to be without judgment. Wherever you are, impact over intent. What is your intentions and why? What are you gaining? Why are you doing this? Write it down. Think about the Swiss cheese analogy. What did you lose? So I lost my connection to myself. Like, I don't feel I'm sexy anymore. Okay, so what do you need to feel sexy again? Maybe take a pole stripping class. Get connected to who you are. Get that strength, that feminine strength into yourself, and take that into your relationship. Not the broken, let me get my moo on and I don't want to turn the lights on, and don't look at me this way. We can only make love with the lights off.
You're right. Oh, why you look at me when you say that, Michelle? All of that stuff I brought to the,
That's me. I tell my husband all the time, turn the lights on. He's like, why? We've been married 16 years. Because I don't want to.
Right. And I appreciate that honesty, because it's an ongoing journey, right? When we're sitting here talking about it, because we do have experience enough to be able to see it conceptually and at a distance, but don't get it twisted. We still have those things that we're working through as well. So I appreciate you naming that specifically. So close us out, Michelle. Give us a little nugget to move on with as we close out our third session together.
Wow. Well, we talked about a lot of things. And the most important thing is, this life is to be lived. Live your life, reflect, take the good with the good, because there's no bad. Discover yourself, love yourself, but most importantly, love yourself through discovery and healing, because that's what it's all about.
Absolutely. And I'm going to add, and get rested. Thank you all so much. And this is our third time, but we'll be back again. So thank you all for listening. We hope this brought you some value today, and just a little bit of comfort, if nothing else, just a little bit of comfort and ease. And we'll see you next time. Take care, y'all. Be well. Hey, we certainly hope you enjoyed what you heard today. If you did, please do all the things you know to do on the socials. Like, subscribe, come back and join us. But above all, get rested.